Hey, all, welcome to Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Today's edition is In the Morning with Doug and John. We recorded this remotely. I was in Grand Junction, Colorado. John was in Minneapolis. And I have to tell you right off the bat that my audio sounds super breathy because the microphone that I was using and the way I had to hold it in the hotel lobby meant that it inadvertently was picking up the air coming out of my nose. And I won't blame you if you feel like it is just intolerable to listen to the entire podcast, but it was pretty good, and we had a good conversation, too, about important issues, including some suggestions about gun violence in this country, and also, the regular morning banter, encouragement, fun, and all the goodness that comes. So thanks so much for being a part of it. I hope you can tolerate my breathiness, and if you want to be a supporter, head on over to the Patreon page that you can get to at dougpagitt.com and become one of the supporters and chip in. So thanks so much for being a part of the podcast. And here it is, In the Morning with Doug and John. All right. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, buddy.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, as you can tell, I've taken up my place inside of a hotel lobby in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Like, what time is the checkout there? Like 5 a.m.?
No, yeah, it's currently 7:25 a.m. here in Grand Junction, and they're hosting here at the hotel a very big deal for Grand Junction, which is the JUCO World Series, the Junior College World Series. So the best players in all of junior college sports are baseball playing here.
Of a baseball.
Baseball. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think World Series has tended to mean like a baseball championship. It's not really the whole world, it's for sure. But anyway, so you're going to see a lot of action. I'm out here I'm running an event next week in Telluride area, and I'm going to attend the Mountain Film Festival over this weekend, which is a social action, social justice kind of do-goodery film festival. And these people are all expert. John Pavlovitz and his wife. Hi. Hi, I'm Doug. Nice to meet you. We're going to spend the weekend together. It's going to be great. Anyway, some people are going to be hanging around.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's just John Pavlovitz just, high-fiving me as he's walking by.
Yeah. Do you know him? Are you friends with John? Yeah, he's a blogger.
No, but a lot of people I know share his stuff all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, it's we're working on a bunch of projects together, so it's really fun. So anyway, he's out here for this event, and yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. Good morning to you. What are you up to today, John?
Not much. Just hanging out at the old apartment. About a few weeks ago, we bought a house and did something very very one percenter, I think.
Yeah.
And we bought an electric lawnmower.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for reducing your carbon emissions. Now, is this one that you plug in and it charges on its own, or is this one that you have to keep a cord attached to the house?
Oh no, this is the new age. This thing comes with a battery, and it just takes like maybe a half hour to charge up this thing, and then you have a full hour of charge. And our mower is also self-propelled, and I'm seriously, if you put this thing on high, you're jogging behind that sucker. And we've got a pretty big front and backyard now, and it mowed this thing just. I mean, mowing the lawn, it's like this, you have this engine and you're pulling on this thing and there's smoke and there's this element of danger, to this machine.
Not this one.
This is like a baby crawling on a stroller across your lawn. That's how.
What is this? The Tesla of lawnmowers that you have secured?
It's pretty well reviewed, but it's called an Ego, E-G-O.
Yeah.
And we got it at Home Depot.
Oh, you can just buy this at the local shops.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard of a Husqvarna or something like that?
No.
It's a company that makes a robot lawnmower, and this is like if you have $3,000 to blow on a lawnmower, you can buy one
Well,
of those. So,
not to get into your finances, but what does one of these set a guy back? These electric lawnmowers that don't destroy the environment while cutting the lawn. These hundreds of dollars, or these thousands of dollars? Is this a home equity line of credit purchase?
No, it's significant. It's about maybe $200 more than like the top of the line gas mower.
Yeah.
So it's about $500 for a lawnmower.
Yeah, but that's in the ballpark, though. That's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not super crazy, but yeah, I had to do a lot of cost benefit analysis on this, but yeah, I'm totally sold on it.
And what was the final point? Maybe helping the environment. Was that the final stone on the scales of choice?
The winning thing for me was that Robin works with an Enneagram 1, and he highly endorsed this.
Okay.
So, this is a man who does not suffer fools.
There you go.
Nor want to be considered one. So I know that he did his due diligence on it.
Love it. Well, hey, John, lots happened since our last conversation last Thursday in the morning. And I got a couple thoughts about gun violence before we get into some of the lighter news of the day.
Yes, please.
People that follow along on the podcast and stream here, they know that last week I was in Philadelphia and we were having a conversation about trying to raise awareness around an assault rifle weapons ban in a protest. And then the very next day, another school shooting happened, and these happen far too often, these school shootings. So I have some thoughts about shootings and what's going on with the overall gun violence epidemic in the U.S. Like a lot of people, I think about this and feel discouraged, but I've got some thoughts that I've been working on for a number of years, actually, that I think apply to this issue.
Yeah, I got to admit, when I first heard about that, I was like, literally my jaw dropped open, like, oh my gosh, we were just talking about that yesterday.
Yeah, it's and there was this piece of film footage from this really sweet person at the school in Santa Fe who she said as a student there, I wasn't surprised. I know this kind of thing happens at school. I was sort of having as a high school student to prepare myself for this, and I know the statistics are all over the place about how if there's more gun shootings now versus other times or not from the 1990s, and I know it's still a rare thing with the number of students that are in school, but there's a real problem in our culture. So not to sound like one of the what used to be one of the social conservatives, religious social conservatives, to say that there's a larger cultural problem. They don't talk about that anymore. Now all they talk about is how they can support legislation, the social conservatives. But there was this big push with social conservatives to try to suggest that we have an entire culture that endorses violence, and I actually think that's where the solution lies. So can I give you my little take on culture? I studied anthropology in college. So that was a long time ago, and I was just a college student, so I'm not an anthropologist. But the thing that I tapped into studying anthropology, cultural anthropology, is that cultures are shaped by four big areas of focus, and that's the way people think. I like to point to the brain when we do that because I think I know a lot of thinking happens in our bodies. In every cell of our bodies has knowledge and information. But anyway, thinking in our brains, the values we hold are part of our culture. I like to point to the heart. The aesthetics that we appreciate, and then the tools that we utilize. So a way to think about a cultural set is a way of thinking, the way of valuing, a way of aesthetics, and a way of acting with our particular tools. Now, all four of those are incredibly powerful when it comes to shaping and forming a culture, and they influence one another. Here's where I think the issue lies with violence, is that we have developed a culture of violence in this country. And so it's in the way we think, it's in the values we hold, the aesthetics we appreciate, and the tools we use. Now, we have tended to believe that if you want to change important issues in a society and a culture, where you need to start is with the value system. At least some of us do, right? So you implore people to have a different value system or different morals, and believing then that from there the values will influence the way people think, the aesthetics they utilize, and the tools that they use. But sometimes culture is changed not by our values first, it's changed by our thinking first. We might learn something, and that influences the other components of our culture until we have a cultural shift. What I think has happened over the last 150 years of development in this society is that we have idolized a kind of violence narrative. So we value it in our system. We think a lot about it. We organize around it. And if we want to change this culture of violence, we have to work at all four of the cultural components. So this is where the gun advocates, people like me, say you can sometimes start with a tool, but you can't only work at the tool level. You actually have to also work at the other levels. So not to sound like one of those social conservatives again, but the fact that we in media and games and in movies, we have a kind of idolization of violence. That's something that affects the way we think and the values we hold and the aesthetics that we appreciate.
Yeah, I was thinking about this in a very a childlike way. In a similar sense, I was thinking about this in regards to sex in movies and how women are treated. And, and I guess one of the effects of the Me Too movement has made me be more sensitive to these things as they're,
Nice.
Portrayed. And like you said, there's such a culture of that exists. Mm-hmm. That you can't escape it. And if it doesn't have an element of sex to certain movies, right. Then either through the actor or through the act, then it doesn't play well. Right. And I think the same is true with violence. And I've never been anyone to bash video games, being someone who plays them myself, mm-hmm. but. Some of the things that I do on a video game, are pretty
like first-person shooter kind of games.
Oh yeah, those kind of things, and I could see in a very susceptible person that could be desensitizing.
Yeah, and this is, there's a lot of arguments about this, and they'll say, look, these video games are played in other societies and other cultures, and they don't turn to violence the way that we do. And it's true, because one component of a culture, just the tool, in other words, the video games, that's not enough to create a culture of violence. You actually have to have 3 or 4 of the elements of tools, aesthetics, values, and thinking. So sure. And this is what any of us who are in the influencing people business, we know, whether you're an advertiser, whether you're someone who does the work that I do, or you're in social movement kind of trying to influence people, whether you're someone at work who's trying to influence your coworkers or your workspace, whether you're a coach on a sports team, you have to work in all the levels, all the areas of someone's life, right? You can't simply tell someone something. You can't simply show someone a way of living. You actually have to create a culture in which that way of living and being starts to take root. And we have an epidemic of violence. And if think about smoking for a minute. When you and I grew up, smoking was ubiquitous in our society. It was, people talked about it, people valued it, it was something that was important. The aesthetic was incredibly well curated, and cigarettes were available. And when it became a medical crisis, a health crisis, what we did around smoking was we said, let's start at the level of access. And over time, it was kind of access and aesthetics. So we said, okay, you can't have cigarette advertising on television. And then we started to remove it from movies. Then we started to remove it from places where access of buying it would not be in places where children would exist.
Like a cigarette machine.
Like a cigarette machine right next to the candy machine or the pop machine.
Just out in the open, yeah.
When I was a kid, a big deal was to have candy cigarettes. Remember those? The little white ones, and the end had a little red tip on them. Yeah, really fun. Or cigars, the bubblegum cigars, right? We used little pink ones, little bubblegum cigars, and you would chew on them until it got down to a little nub. Some guy wearing a hat like this, would chew it down to a little nub, and then you'd kind of walk around with it like you. So we created an entire aesthetic with a set of tools that supported a value system and allowed people to draw conclusions that smoking was something we would support in our culture. And it clearly was.
Yeah.
When we decided to change that, we didn't only say to people, it's a health hazard, knowledge level. We didn't only say, let's think about people who are affected by secondhand smoke. We also worked at the area of aesthetics and the area of tools. So we tried to remove the context in which you're supporting an entire culture. This is actually how it works, that when you want to change an idea, you can sometimes do it by first giving someone a tool, right? So I'm here in Colorado, and I'm carrying with me my little travel ball for my
a doggy toy,
my sore butt. And I mean the outside muscles on my butt. So I use this as it's like a massage ball, and I lean up against it on a wall. And I was doing this over in the hotel lobby, and I would like take the ball and put it right on my gluteus medius, which is this damaged muscle I have. In my butt. It hurts so bad, so I'll put the ball in there, and it's like a deep massage, and I'll lean up against the wall, and I'll roll the ball around. And this worker from the hotel came by, Ed, and he kind of stopped and looked at me, and there's this big, tall, lanky guy by himself in a corner, like outside by the pool, leaning up against a wall. He can't see that there's a ball.
With a look of ecstasy on his face.
Looking like Baloo the bear rubbing himself up on the back of a tree. Yeah. And I'm leaning on this thing, and I'm just moaning. And he came up, and I said, yeah, I've got this little crossball. Right, okay, so this is an object lesson, right? I literally have it with me and my roller pad, my foam roller pad. But when someone created this ball, this tool became an entire concept in my mind. Oh, you know what I should do? I should use this particular tool and try to affect the damaged muscle that I have that needs deep myofascial massage. So the tool opened up a concept in my mind that's a kind of healing that I could experience. So now I value this. I bring it with me. I make sure it's the right size, and they've curated these balls from a lacrosse ball or a baseball or something people used to do. So it's kind of dense and soft, but it's also got these little puckers in it for all kinds of reasons that have to do with muscle. So they've adapted it and changed it. An entire culture of muscle care has developed that started with someone's thinking and had to move to the tool first. In fact, many of our advents in our society and culture have come by the tool. The lawnmower you mentioned earlier, the fact that thing exists changes my mind about what I should use in my yard, and now my value system and thinking and aesthetics are going to change because the tool led the way. This is just the way. It's not so easy as saying, oh, someone played a video game and then goes out and kills people. No, of course not. That's not how any life change happens. That's not how any cultural change happens. It's over time a normalizing set of features are developed. So I really think that what we have to do is think about this as a cultural issue, thinking, values, aesthetics, and tools. And if we could start to approach it on all of those levels, I think we could start to erode a culture of violence. But the problem in our society, and I'll just finish with this thought, is that we still believe that violence and death by violence is something that we need and depend upon. We just need to make sure we do it at the right time, in the right place, and only to the right people. And over time, I think we're going to come to the realization in our society that death and violence and death by violence, that's actually where the problem lies, and we have to eradicate it from our entire system, which means war and judicial systems and the whole infrastructure that supports death by violence in our society. This is my soliloquy on gun violence today.
That's beautiful and very deep.
Deep, baby.
So you're suggesting that maybe perhaps as a country we could maintain our gun culture and have this coexisting peaceful world, like that is, that it's like the existence of the tools facilitate the bad actions. But if if our culture was different around surrounding violence, then there'd be less of an attraction to use those tools in that kind of way?
I think so. And in this way, this is what I'm in agreement with the National Rifle Association and their decisions in the late 1970s and 1980s. They were really afraid that if guns were made less accessible, that people would think about guns less and then would value guns less, and then guns would go away. This is part of the logic of the NRA being an advocacy organization to support gun culture, is they said we cannot allow any limitation on guns, because if we do and guns are not available, the same thing that happened to cigarettes, the same thing that happened to leaded gas, the same thing that happened to aerosol cans, all of these are going to go away. And if the same thing that happened to those is going to happen to guns, that means that people aren't going to care about them, they're not going to think about them, and they're going to drift from consciousness. So we have to find ways to insert those into our cultural norms. Like if you're a product, like I own a Mini Cooper, I swear to you, part of the reason I own a Mini Cooper is because I saw that Italian Job movie where they introduced the Mini Cooper, right? Like they put it in movies. We advertisers know this. We know that inserting products into normative places of cultural contact allows someone to normalize to it. So I really do think that if we were to limit the amount of access that we had to gun, you could still reserve the right to have a gun, but you would have a population that just wouldn't find it to be desirable. Like we didn't legislate out tobacco. What we did was said there's some places you can't have it. We made accessing it more difficult, and we raised the price of it to a level that the smoking rates have dropped over time. And I think that's because we treated it as a health crisis. I think the same thing when it comes to any other of our cultural norms is we don't have to legislate the morality, the values. We can legislate the access and the aesthetics that allow us to see a kind of success that would allow people to say, I feel good about the fact that there's now smoke-free bars in Minnesota and many places in the country, right? That I don't have to experience secondhand smoke. I feel really good about that. Where people, even like me, thought, what's a bar going to feel like if there's not smoke in there? That's part of the thing. That was a cultural norm. And now we've just assumed, no, it's not going to be part of the cultural norm. So I think if we could remove it from access over time, what you see is a cultural shift and a cultural change, and that doesn't feel like it's being forced on people. It feels like it's something that people are. And look, this comes very difficult and very difficult. It's very difficult to do this, to accomplish this. It's not easy. We did some work in Guatemala a number of years ago in some villages, trying to help the people in the villages use less wood for burning and for cooking. And it was to accomplish two purposes. One, to keep them from chopping down all the small wood on the hillsides, which was causing landslides and real problems, and deforestation on the hillside. And secondly, people are affected by the smoke inside their house, and it affects their lungs and causes some real breathing problems because they'd have little fires inside their small houses.
I wouldn't even think about that,
Right? So it's a real problem, and we were trying to address this problem. So we brought in solar cookers that would heat up from the sun and then allow people to cook in these small ovens. And it's a really great tool and technology. Well, after we did a bunch of training and came back the second year, and all the solar cookers were set aside and were being used as storage facilities, right, in their house, storage containers in their house. And we asked, so why? Like, we did the training, we showed you how to use it, it cooks faster and sometimes better. And almost to a person, they all said, well, our house doesn't smell like a home anymore.
Oh, my word.
That smell is something that made it feel like a house, like a lot of us would experience if you had a fireplace with with wood burning fireplace. You like that smell. It was so normative. One of the things we didn't recognize, those of us social do-gooders coming in and saying, like, we can solve deforestation and we can solve lung breathing problems, was, but the aesthetic was really important. Right? It's really, really important. So you take guns as an example, and you say a lot of people love the aesthetic of it. Now they don't want to love the aesthetic over the and think that that's going to cause death of innocent children. Of course not. And they want those two things to be disconnected. So you have to think about the fact that the aesthetic is important to people, and what do you do about that? That's something that electric cars have. Every tool that comes in and replaces another way of behaving has to deal with the tool, the aesthetics, the values, and the thinking. And aesthetics, actually, as human beings, is sometimes more important than any other element we have in our culture and society. We are an aesthetic species, and we care a lot about the look and feel and taste and sound, smell. So,
well, in a sense that that's what the excuse me, the anti-tobacco movement did, was to help change that aesthetic through relentless advertising, and this is what a clean lung looks like, this is what a smoker's lung looks like, and really making smokers, disparaging them, in their activity of smoking.
Yeah. All right. End of sermon.
Wow. Yeah. When you told me you had a little thing you wanted to say, boy, that's you put some thought into that, Doug.
Yeah. Thanks. I try to keep it to 5 minutes, but that never works. It's like my...
There's a preacher's disease there, Doug.
Preacher's disease. Yeah. I get it. I get it. Sort of.
Hey, going on to other issues.
Important things. Yeah.
I don't picture you as a big football fan, Doug. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not a big football fan. I'm a fan of people that like football, though.
Yeah. I mean, I like a good play,
Yeah.
But I don't care who makes it. But anyway, so the NFL has now made it illegal for the players to kneel during the national anthem.
Are you kidding me?
Yep, it's been codified, and so they will face a fine of some sort, or the team will, if that happens. And if the players don't want to stand for the anthem, they can just stay in the locker room, they said. So this is just. I see.
So they don't. That's their workaround. They don't have to be out on the field, but if they're out there, they have to stand.
Yeah, and so like I mean, like a horse team of lawyers have went into working on the language of all of this in preparation for the. But I think one of the reasons why they felt comfortable making this is because they want to control their product, and that Gorish is on the Supreme Court. So if it goes there, he has in the past been shown to favor business over people. That they may prevail positively if it goes that far.
Yeah, well, it is their product. It is a private enterprise with public support. To me, I'm going to sound curmudgeon-y for a minute. It just makes me think just another reason to not care about these people's particular product any longer. The NFL,
exactly.
The National Football League is just really. I mean, I recognize the importance it is to a lot of people, and I get it that it's a cultural norming action in our society. But I just find them to be so out of step with the kind of way of viewing the world that I want to be advocating. I just want nothing to do with those people any longer. Just, people are,
Well, it really seems like it's like a tone deaf overreach, in the sense that towards the end of last season, hardly any players were kneeling during the and so. It's like, well, it's just something that just would have played itself out. It may have appeared here and there, but it would have been, last cycle's news story had they just let it die.
Yeah.
But they instead chose to, make a
big statement about it.
A big statement about it. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see, how the players react. And
well, I've got a little news story for you.
Apparently,
a 30-year-old man in New York, lost his lawsuit against his parents, who demanded that he move out. A 30-year-old man went to renter's court, and said, "My parents are trying to evict me with undue notice and undue pressure." A 30-year-old man whose parents finally said, "Hey, son, you got to go. You can't live here anymore." And he didn't.
Was he claiming ownership as part of the family or something?
He claimed renters' rights. And he said, my parents, in the court documents and his verbal arguments, he was arguing, my parents never demanded that I pay rent or help out around here, so they can't say that, like that wasn't part of the verbal and lived rental agreement. New York is a very renter supportive state, and so this 30-year-old man wouldn't move out for a year, saying, you can't make me. And when they called the police are like, well, look, we can't move somebody out if he's claiming that he's a renter in your basement as your son. So they went all the way up. And he's on CNN and everything. This fellow that's just like, no, my parents didn't give me adequate notice. And they gave him 6 weeks notice and offered to pay $1,100 for a deposit on another apartment. He's like, I can't possibly move. So, I have a 26-year-old son currently living in our house, and I'm like, oh, I need to get this thing. I need to start treating him like
talking to a lawyer.
And start getting notarized notices of need to vacate the family dwelling. Just a beautiful example of the court system.
I think you should
having to apply a law that was designed to protect renters now in a whole other circumstance for a 30-year-old.
I think you should have a pre-signed eviction notice, on a magnet on your refrigerator, just ready to be, submitted at any time that you want to, just to let them know.
I love it. I mean,
you're welcome, but not forever.
Yeah. Can you imagine if the guy had won that, 18 and 19-year-olds, some who want to get out of their house, some are like, oh, no. I have 18 years of rental history in this house. You cannot possibly move me out on such short notice, 6 weeks, 8 weeks notice.
I mean, I can imagine just the air of hostility that would exist in that house, and your ability just to be like, hey, I don't give a shit. I'm not going. Whatever.
I don't care. Hey, did you see this headline about France being invaded by giant killer worms?
Hell no. Tell me more.
Oh, yeah. Apparently there is a species of flathead hammerpede flathead worm that grow to become a meter or more, 3 feet, as we would call it in the U.S., nearly 3 feet long, and they're ravenous predators, and they eat up all the other worms and slugs, and they're just moving around. And apparently what they do is they shoot out a poison, like a pufferfish, that then paralyzes their prey. Then they invert their stomachs out of their mouth, wrap their stomach around the prey, and pull it back in and consume it. And they have these
gruesome
digestive enzymes that liquefy the prey when it's outside, and then suck it in as through its own stomach as a straw, and then it pulls its own stomach back in. I mean, this is like the greatest alien hammerhead worm concept that you could imagine.
How fast are these things? That's what I want to know.
Great,
because it sounds like they're developing an appetite going up the food chain.
Yes, yeah.
Starting with the worms, then to the slugs, then it's going to be to lizards or whatever is.
Yeah, it doesn't say how quickly they can slither. This article doesn't say how quickly they can slither across the room, across the ground. Like, could a person outrun one of these? But you get a little biomedical accident that happens around one of these hammerhead earthworms, and we've got ourselves an issue.
So it's going to be quite unpleasant.
I appreciate the French, but it seems like a good place to experiment with this. France. The French don't seem
like they
have
a lot of nuclear power.
The French can handle this.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
Glenn Snoddy, the inventor of the fuzz/distortion pedal, has died at the age of 96. Snoddy was a Nashville engineer who was responsible for recording country and western luminaries like Johnny Cash and Loretta Lynn and Hank Williams, the senior. During a recording session for Marty Robbins, the bass amp started to make a horrible, this buzzing noise, and Snoddy discovered that the bass player had blown the transformer in the amplifier. Now, just as a sidebar, I would love to sit in on the country music jam session where the bass player blows his amp. He's just tub thumping so hard. So Snotty went and he dissected the broken amp, and he made a pedal that would recreate that exact buzzing sound.
Like he liked it. He heard something in that brokenness that he liked.
Yeah, there was something about that was like, well, this isn't good for this, but that could be something. And so then all of it became part of what was called the Nashville sound. And then, of course, the sound of metal. I mean, this guy the distortion pedal.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where music went from poing 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 to chung chung chung. Right.
Ah.
So let me see here. Snotty was not also a great studio engineer in Nashville, but he was also a World War II veteran and the recipient of not one, not two, but 3 Bronze Stars for heroic duty in battle.
Really?
Yeah. How could you go from like winning 3 Bronze Stars to like, I'm going to go make some music now?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And he's probably one of those guys from World War II that would never talk about it, right? Because that's the
right.
This funny thing that we honor war heroes, and then they're like, it was horrible, and I never want to talk about it again. Well, but
the medals are in a coffee can up on a shelf.
As the preacher is wont to do, just, wrapping the last hymn back into the sermon.
It's the woodpecker, Doug. It's the 9 o'clock woodpecker.
Oh, gotta go. There's a great example of the tool, the distortion pedal, creating an entire aesthetic that then became part of the norm of creating the Nashville sound and then rock music, right? That someone created something that then became so normative.
A Rubicon, yeah.
A Rubicon. It became the Rubicon of the future. Yeah, this is how it works in our life, in our society. Well, hey, I'll leave you on this one. Apparently, Time Magazine thought they should put out an entire article on the what you should know about the Nipah virus outbreak from bats. Time Magazine. Apparently, there is an outbreak of virus that comes from bats, and there's something you should know about it. So I'm just going to let you Google that a little later, read about that, because if it's not new varieties of worms, there's now a new virus that's spreading through the human race that's gonna be the end to us all.
I like how the most positive thing about our show today was me buying a kick-ass lawnmower.
I know. Maybe it's because I'm in Colorado on a Rocky Mountain high. I'm just like all depressive about like gun violence and
Doug,
killer
they have a
worms
cure
and
there
viruses.
for you, my friend. Go get yourself a cookie.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've been eating these little gummy bears, and man, my thoughts are they're on fire.
That's right. You want to go play racquetball and build a house?
I've never enjoyed a gummy bear quite so much. I don't know why they're different in Colorado.
I don't know.
And they're really expensive too. That's the weird thing.
Hey, let me tell you, an example of, you'll never find a better example of customer service than your bud tender at a dispensary.
Really?
Oh, knowledgeable, competent, yes, they are into it.
If we were all that good.
Exactly.
All right, buddy. Well, I got to run off and do Colorado things.
Yeah, you go spend the weekend with John Pavlovitz.
Okay. Well, you go spend the weekend with Robin.
Thank you very much.
I think you got the upper end of that deal. All right, buddy.
Hey, and if you're watching the show, and if you have any interesting news items that you'd like to submit, just go ahead and drop them in the comments.
That's a great idea. People should do that. And they can follow the In the Morning with Doug and John page, so you can find them.
Yes, we need to get that link out there.
Yeah.
I need to get that link out there.
Over and out, my friend.
All right, have fun. Bye-bye.